Unchained. I'm one of your three hosts, AK Kamara, joined by David Webster. Say hello, David.
Good evening, everybody.
And we are usually joined by a third member of our podcast, Drew. Outstanding, but unfortunately, he's not going to be able to make it to tonight's show. We are currently on episode 9 of this brand new podcast where we try and show from a cultural, political, and honestly, just real life perspective that we are culture warriors. And in order to actually win the battle for the soul of this country, we have to unleash ourselves as culture warriors. So we can't just be stuck with like the average everyday response of politics. We have to be able to dive deeper from different perspectives and understand exactly why it is important that not only have we won certain battles within the culture war, but we actually have to bring this through all the way to completion. And I think that right now, where we film this podcast in Minneapolis, Minnesota, actual listening area, I myself live about 30 miles north of Minneapolis. David lives probably about 15 miles south of Minneapolis. That this is more important and apparent than ever before. We have to be able to win the culture. We actually can't just win one little position here or there. And hopefully this podcast can bring all that together so we can actually have an impact, because I fundamentally believe that in this country, the average American actually doesn't believe what the leftist Marxists believe in this country. And so this is Culture Wars Unchained. Make sure that you guys hit the like button. Make sure that you hit the share button. We're on episode 9, and if you're not sharing, then no one's going to see this podcast. And also make sure to drop your comments, because throughout the show, sometimes we're going to kind of have some moving parts. We don't have our exact format down to a science. We might address certain comments and questions throughout the show or save them for the second half. And so that's what we have tonight. Obviously, there's a million things going on, but we're going to try and touch not just political issues, but also cultural issues that are affecting our country. And it looks like our guest, the indomitable Representative Walter Hudson, has joined us. Walter, can you please tell our audience who you are and what you do?
Yeah, sure. I am. Am I being heard all right? First of all, let me check that.
No, yeah, you sound great, man. You
We
sound great,
got you
brother.
loud and
Great.
clear.
Sorry, I have technical issues with my microphone all the time, so I wanted to make sure. So, yeah, I am a second-term state representative in Minnesota. I serve on a variety of committees. The one probably most relevant to our conversation tonight would be the House Fraud Prevention and State Agency Oversight Committee, also on education finance, public safety, and judiciary. And prior to my service in the state house, I was a city council member in Albertville for a number of years. And outside of elected office, I've had an eclectic blue collar career in private security and logistics. I was an operations manager for a contractor with a package delivery service. And of course, I've done a lot of side gigs as a commentator in the political space, Hot Air, PJ Media, had a radio show for 3 years. So I'm all over the place, but politics is my jam, and I'm happy to be with you guys here tonight.
Thanks for being on the show. David, tell the people who you are. What do you do?
Yeah, absolutely. My name is David Webster, and I am the third leg in the chair that is Culture Warriors Unchained. My background: I'm a legal immigrant to this country, which is going to be a huge portion of what we're talking about this evening. Um, former military veteran, and I just, like I say all the time, I love this country. I love what we stand for, and we need to win the fight for the culture. We need to win the fight for the truth. Legacy media is telling people a lot of things, and so we're here to break those things down and kind of get to the root of it and ask people that are local to the area, people like Representative Hudson, that can actually answer the questions and kind of cut through the noise.
Yeah, and so, just to clarify a couple of things, I don't know if this is just a me thing. When people say I'm a legal immigrant, if you say it too fast, it sounds like you said I'm an illegal immigrant. So yes, you
Legal,
are a legal immigrant, not
properly
one of.
documented product of adoption.
There you
Yes.
go. There you go. You're not one of the whatever 25 plus or so million illegals in this country. So obviously, to get things started, you clearly, if unless you live under a rock, you probably have heard the story of the what I am calling ICE Watch domestic terrorist Renee Good, who was interfering with a lawful ICE operation, and she was tragically shot and killed. And I say tragically because I do believe that all life is precious, and even when people are committing criminal acts and they forfeit their life, I still do believe that that loss of life is tragic. But that has spurred protests and riots all across this country, and obviously being ground zero here in the Minneapolis-St. Paul area, a lot of people have a lot of different opinions on what has happened. And so, you know, what I want to be able to have a conversation, especially just on this, is kind of attack a few different perspectives and angles and kind of get everyone's insight on kind of how they have seen things happen, not just what they've witnessed online or encountered online, but your real life experiences when you're talking to average everyday Minnesotans. I think that that's sometimes what happens in these scenarios is we get into our silos, into our bubbles, and the reality that exists for the majority of people outside of that bubble is sometimes drastically different. If you've been on X, it can feel like it's just like we're like seconds or minutes away from a giant civil war breaking out all across this country. But then if you go out, I don't know, go to work, or like myself, you attend a gala on Saturday night, things can be different. So what I want to first kind of do is kick it over to you, Walter, and, you know, just kind of give me your one overall thoughts on what you've seen, and that can be as open-ended as you want. If you want to talk about the way that Democrats have acted, if you want to talk specifically about things that have been shocking or eye-opening to you, and then, like I said, if you can just, you know, again, maybe kind of add some insight of what you're seeing from people that are not really tuned into online or legacy media kind of perspective.
Well, I have to admit, I haven't really gotten outside of the X bubble since the Good situation happened. It happened while I was in DC this week. Literally during our hearing in the House Oversight Committee, the first we heard of it was congressional Democrats talking about it and already starting to cast their narrative. And as I learned more about it, of course, the information trickles, right? And unlike Democrats, we actually like to know what we're talking about before we speak to it. So seeing the video and the different statements and what have you, my opinion formulated relatively quickly, but it took a little bit of time. I would love to, usually my bellwether for what people are thinking is when I talk to my in-laws, like especially as a big group in like a holiday dinner or something along those lines, because they're such a diverse group ideologically and politically. They vote both ways, and they're not political people. And so whatever it is that they're talking about, to my mind, is a nice kind of sample of what people are probably thinking. And I haven't had that opportunity yet, but I can predict, right? I'm sure there's horror and disappointment and sadness at the fact that somebody lost their life, and that's appropriate. Of course, that's appropriate. But I would be very curious to hear their reaction to the rhetoric that's been put out by the likes of Governor Tim Walz, Mayor Jake Fry, Ilhan Omar, Democrats up and down. You know, once again, it kind of reminds me of the assassination of Charlie Kirk, where they're all singing off the same sheet of horrendous paper, saying horrific things. And what I find so peculiar about the situation is they've been singing about J6, January 6th, for, what are we talking about now, 5 years? We're into the 6th year of them complaining about that. That was one day of a handful of people, relatively speaking, engaged in riot, which was not appropriate, and it came and it went into story. What we're experiencing now is everything that they said J6 was, on a daily basis nationwide, fomented routinely by Democrats. You've got Tim Walz literally calling for civil war, all but saying those words, threatening to mobilize the National Guard to go after and interfere with federal law enforcement. You've got these guys not just putting out the rhetoric that folks should commit a federal crime under U.S. code, which is what it is whenever you interfere with federal law enforcement, but then also materially supporting them with all these organizations that provide people with advice, legal advice, to commit crimes. I don't understand why we're not seeing tons of folks being frog marched into federal prison right now Matt Walsh was covering this today of the types of organizations. I think you brought one up, the one that this gal was affiliated with, who are providing materials to teach people that they should break the law. That's got to violate some federal regulation. So that's kind of where I'm at. I am not surprised, but certainly shook and deeply concerned, to put it mildly, that we have one major political party in this country right now that is actively fomenting insurrection.
Yeah, no, I think that perspective is very interesting. Now, you had mentioned early on, obviously, you were out in Washington, D.C., and you were testifying as part of the Congressional Oversight Committee, and we're going to get into that story after the fact, but I'm also just kind of curious, and then move on to you, David, after this question to Walter. But what was it like being out there when this news first broke? As obviously someone, you're a state representative, and you have a large constituency that probably was, relatively had a lot of questions, and will often probably turn to you and to see what your perspective is. What was that like, not being in Minnesota, especially considering, that night there was already, groups of protesters and rioters forming. What was that like for you, man?
It was very much like being inside of a bubble, right? I mean, the hearing was 5 hours long. I didn't look at my phone once the entire time except to check the time. And so I had no idea what was going on. And we were asked about it in a press scrim immediately after and had nothing to say because none of us had been looking at it. We were focused on the hearing. And then, throughout the day, it wasn't until later that night, once I got back to the hotel and actually started looking at X and what have you, that I started to kind of get a sense of where things were at. So it very much felt detached. I felt like I was detached from what was going on because I wasn't physically there in the Twin Cities, and I hadn't been looking at my phone as much as I might typically do on any given day. So the full reality of it didn't hit until much later.
So, like, for you, once you, I guess, first found out, was it like call the wife and say like, hey, be careful? Because like I can only imagine that when something like this happens and it immediately becomes politicized by the left, right? And they start fomenting, this new level of just overt violent rhetoric. Is there a part of you that's like, okay, you got to call the family and say, make sure that you're protecting yourselves, or are there certain things? I don't expect you to tell me the protocols, but is that a part of kind of your mindset or mentality? Is like, man, like, I got to make sure to get back home as soon as I can, but like you're still out there doing your thing,
Yeah. I didn't have actually any real sense of personal danger or concern for my family in that moment, partially because of where we live relative to the cities and the knowledge that, these folks are, first of all, too lazy, and secondly, more focused on the shinier targets, so to speak. Probably not going to be going around to random state legislators' houses. And thirdly, because certain protocols are indeed in effect, and if something were to happen, I would know about it, and it would be dealt with quite well and quite quickly.
Nice. So yeah, David, I mean, again, kind of going back to that initial question, what has been your experience witnessing how things have played out, and within your circles of people that aren't necessarily like politically knowledgeable or activated, have you seen a significant contrast between what you've been tuned into or plugged into online and people that are kind of in your circle of real life, man?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, I've seen everything from even before this particular tragedy took place. There were people posting like QR codes that you could scan from your phone to like go to these classes to learn how to like dox or track ICE or report it to everybody so they could put it on social media. Hey, they're in this neighborhood. And I would see that stuff and I would share it on social media and be like, hey, I'm pretty sure this is a crime. I got blocked from a couple of groups on Facebook because I just went into the comments and tagged at, DHS at White House, and they didn't like that. See, I'm just like, bring it to the light, man. I've noticed within like the sphere of people, like even like coworkers I have, people that I would say are relatively left leaning, but they're kind of that like center leftist. that are like, why was this person there? She had a family. She, like, they're like, I went to work instead. They're like, I don't like what's happening. I want to go protest, but I do A when I'm off work, and I'm not going to put myself in a situation with, because they have, you have dependents expecting you to come home. I think while it is a tragedy, there's a certain amount of like personal responsibility that people have to accept. It's possible for two things to be true at the same time, that this was a tragedy, but that it was also avoidable. And we have multiple videos that I want us to break down here, kind of what was said versus what actually happened, that kind of lay that out. Like, this person isn't entirely blameless. One thing you mentioned, though, Walter, that really stuck out to me, Representative Hudson, I apologize, um, is that's what I appreciate about you. You're like AK. You're one of the most non-politician politicians I've met. But one of the things you mentioned Charlie Kirk, and one of the things that I find fascinating, the difference between like the situation with George Floyd and the assassination of Charlie Kirk, is just the response, the human response to it. Right, one was to destroy Minneapolis, and then one was prayer vigils, and just communion with your fellow believers around the country. And then now you have this situation, and you have people throwing rocks, throwing chunks of ice and snow, water bottles at ICE agents, and they're getting tackled and arrested, and they don't understand why. I was trying to find it. I haven't been able to successfully find it because I wanted to put it on tonight, but there's even footage of this guy trying to do something with a U.S. flag outside of like the Whipple building in Minneapolis. And this vet goes over there and grabs the flag and ends up in like a 1v6 fight, and wins, which is beautiful, but and gets away with the flag. I don't have that footage. I saw it earlier. It was on my phone, and now for whatever reason I can't find it. But just seeing that, and just the incredible contrast in response to a tragedy, right? And I think that says a lot about who these people are that are reacting the way that they're reacting. And then yeah, just watching the governor and the mayor call for a war that didn't make any sense to me. And I'm like, who's gonna fight this for you? Like, you didn't even deploy with your soldiers, Governor Walz. Like the paper trail is there. Like, I'm a proud veteran. I deployed overseas. I didn't run from my duty, and you knew the orders were coming because you were in a high enough position that you dropped your retirement packet to get out of deploying. Like, those people aren't gonna follow you. Like, maybe one in a thousand of them will, but yeah, most of them are not gonna participate in that. AK, do you want to jump into the videos, or did you want to round table some other stuff first?
Yeah, I mean, just again, sticking on this topic, I'll kind of provide you with my perspective. I posed a question. Obviously, I think for me, I've experienced three very, very different perspectives in regards to, the shooting of Renee Good. The first perspective is obviously being on X and being someone that is connected in with right of center personalities online, whether we're talking about, someone like Jack Posobiec, or looking at independent journalists, such as, responses from Nick Sorter, responses from people on the ground like Cam Higby, and just kind of seeing that there's a very clear line distinguished between, I believe, people that discern reality, which is that Renee Good put herself in a situation in which she could have complied with law enforcement orders to get out of her vehicle, but then she decided to not obey those orders. Now, the question of whether or not she was intending on actually killing the ICE officer is, to me, not really significant, because the question is in regards to authorized use of lethal force. Did the person who used the lethal force believe that they were in reasonable danger of receiving either death or great bodily harm? And I think that level of discernment, when we're talking about a career law enforcement officer, that is what matters more. So it's funny to see that, again, there's this kind of like disparate worldview of, on the left, they view that Renee Good was just a mom dropping off her kid at a school, and some ICE thugs came and basically executed her point blank, and that is not supported by reality. But it hasn't stopped the left from pushing that narrative. And again, the folks on the right are like, some I think are maybe pushing it a step too far and being like, oh, Renee Good intended to 100% murder that ICE agent. I don't know if you can necessarily go to that point. So that's one perspective, right? So I see the perspective. I land that I think that she was 100% trying to impede in a federal investigation. There's enough evidence to show that, again, she was trained by ICE Watch, who I believe are a domestic terrorist organization. And I believe that regardless of what her true intent was, her vehicle did become a lethal weapon, and use of lethal force was authorized by the ICE agent, and that's the way that I perceive it. Now, the second perspective is from like a normie standpoint. I talked with a family member of mine who is not a political actor in any way, shape, or form. He's a guy that's voted for both Democrats and Republicans, and his perspective is like, hey, this lady, I don't really know what her deal is, but like, I think that, maybe the ICE officer should have maybe got out of the way. And so like, I had this whole conversation with this person, and, just said, all right, so do you think that our borders matter? Do you think that, we should enforce our border immigration laws? And he's like, yeah. And I'm like, so if someone's stopping that, like, what do you do? And he's like, well, yeah, it's a tough question. So he's not necessarily sold one way or the other. But I thought that was kind of an interesting perspective, that means that the legacy media narrative is kind of playing in certain areas. And then the third perspective, I went to gala on Saturday night. It was a fundraising gala for a parochial school. And the main MC, again, this is a non-political function. These are people raising money for a school, was doing Trump impersonations that were hilarious, like not being mean to Trump, but like actually being like, this is the greatest fundraiser of all time, like stuff like that, right? And people were laughing, having a great time, threw some jokes out there about leering centers. And again, this is just miles away from where, this event occurred. So, when I talked to people there, it was pretty straightforward. They're like, yeah, it was sad that it happened, but the ICE officer was doing their job, and it sucks that lethal force was used. So these are the three perspectives that I've had. I think that the perspective of the leftists is one that is not necessarily winning, especially when you kind of look at so far, knock on wood, that, things don't get more out of control. I think things could have been a whole lot worse on, I think, what was that, Saturday night when they had those huge crowds. And luckily, the awful things that did happen weren't as crazy. But that's just kind of my perspective. I think that thanks to Elon buying X, and thanks to being able to share all of these different videos, which I know, David, you want to take a look at a few of them, it does shatter the leftist narrative that this was just a mom dropping off her kids and an ICE agent, aka Gestapo agent of Trump administration, went and just executed this woman in cold blood. That narrative is not supported by the evidence that's overwhelming, and that's kind of what my perspective is. So I know, David, you said that you had a few videos that you want to pull up. I don't know if AM wants to pull it up, or if you want to try and control it, but kind of walk us through what you want to look at first.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things that's been happening, obviously we live in the age of spin, and everything is, how much outrage can we spark? But while AM is pulling up that video, I did want to mention something I heard really interesting this week, actually, was that unlike what happened with the George Floyd riots, we are in the middle of winter here in Minnesota, and I think all it's going to take is one good blizzard, and a lot of these people aren't going to come back out, hopefully. So what I have here, I did not realize it was this small. AM, I apologize for that. This is the original video. We don't have to play it all the way to the end because there will be some strong language at the very end, and I don't know how YouTube's going to treat us about that. But this is what CNN, ABC, all the legacy medias ran with, was this original footage that makes it look like, this person, this person's the victim in the situation, and obviously there's more to the story, but I wanted to play this first. And you can actually see the ICE agent in question there holding his own recording device. You can't hear what's being said. All right, you can go ahead and kill it, AM. So, and then all the news outlets were like, a woman murdered by ICE. Like that was all of the social media posts, all of the headlines everywhere. Um, and yeah, if you just watch that video with no other context, no other information, it looks like ICE over, the argument could be made it looks bad. I actually don't necessarily think so because you can hear some of what they're saying. The next video of what actually happened is going to have a little bit better. But before we go to that, I wanted to throw up. There's an eyewitness that was interviewed by an independent journalist on the street that was talking about what this individual with this lady and her wife were out doing that day and possibly the days prior. AM if you have that video. And then the other thing, Tim Pool covered this. This woman had Missouri plates. She had just moved here from out of state, and yeah, go ahead and play this, AM. I'll keep going after this.
Can you describe a little bit about what this woman looked like? Was there anyone else in the car with her? Did you know if she was the target?
I don't know if she was a target. They clearly wanted her out of there because she was the main car leading the protest, is my understanding. I talked to another guy who was driving behind her, but she was very successful in blocking traffic. She was doing what she was set out to do, and so they wanted to get her the hell out of there. Yeah.
So it looked like she was impeding ICE vehicles.
Definitely, yeah.
Okay.
That was her goal.
Do you have a read on her demographic?
I think she was a white woman. Looked like I didn't see her when she was alive. Just slumped over in the car. It looked like she had dyed short curly hair. I have a video.
I think that's enough. That's enough of that video, AM. So before we get into the video from the officer's perspective, I just kind of want to get Representative Hudson your view on this, and then AK kind of, versus the initial narrative that we were sold. This person's murdered in cold blood. Was just trying to take her kids to work or take her kids to school or something, versus what that lady just revealed to us. That's been confirmed.
Well, I've seen the video you're going to show next, and so that kind of taints my judgment a little bit. I can't pretend that I haven't seen it, and so where I'm coming from on all of this is that the narrative that she was just an innocent lady. First of all, we know that's not true even from the first video, because you can clearly hear the ICE officer command her, and it is a command. It's not a request. It's not an ask. It's not a pretty please. It's a lawful command to get out of the car. Does she? No. That right there tells you all you really need to know. But beyond that, we know now that she was intentionally obstructing traffic, parking perpendicular across the street in order to impede ICE vehicles. That is a crime under U.S. code. You can go to jail just for that. Just for that. She was given a lawful command to exit her vehicle, and she responded by putting the vehicle in gear. Now, I don't know about you, but if I am, and I have been, if I'm pulled over by law enforcement and they ask me to get out of the car, which I've never been asked that, but if I'm given that lawful command, the last thing I'm going to do is put the vehicle in gear. That is not a signal that things are about to get better. That is very much an indication that things are about to escalate, and the escalation is being instigated by me by putting the vehicle into gear. Doesn't matter reverse, forward, doesn't matter if I hit the gas or not. The fact that I took that action is a defiance of the command that I was just given, and an indication that I'm about to escalate the situation, requiring law enforcement to raise their level of force in order to overcome whatever it is that I'm about to bring to bear. Okay, so we know those two things, and then we see her reverse, and then with 0-second interval slam it into forward gear with the guy right in front of the vehicle, as we will see. And so, to my mind, there is zero question that this is the fault of Renee Good. We consistently hear this narrative that the police, that law enforcement is burdened with this duty to de-escalate. Well, what about the people that they're confronting? Did Renee Good have any obligation to de-escalate? I believe she did. She had a duty to de-escalate. She had a duty to comply. She had a duty to obey the law. It's the same duty each and every American has, and she failed. So it is what it is.
Yeah, and I'll kind of take it a step further, and beyond that. I think that obviously the way that the media will take a narrative, you can take it in its best possible light, that they just have a healthy distrust of law enforcement. The worst possible light is that they want to actually help foment what radical Marxists want to do in this country, which is to bring revolution. And so they will frame messages and narratives in a certain perspective. Like, for instance, the night of after the shooting occurred, ABC News, David Muir, when he starts off a show, he'll do like the top story in the country, and the editors or producers, or maybe David Muir made the call, added that before the officer discharged his firearm, that she turned her wheels to the right. So that, like, literally in their synopsis breakdown at the top of the show, they added in that part. And I'm like, this is what they do all the time. But I think that the second video, what it shows is this woman, obviously she's, an eyewitness, and, how credible is she? I don't know. But she did reveal something that we now know to be 100% true, is that Renee Good was trying to impede and block a lawful ICE operation that was occurring. And so, again, the narrative that was initially put forward of just a mom that was just dropping her kids off and she got turned around and mixed up is 100% false. But this is what leftists do, because they're trying to evoke an emotional response. The leftists themselves don't actually care. Like, Renee Good is a useful idiot to them to be able to help bring upon their revolution that they want. And make no mistake, like, the leftists in this country that say things like, ICE are a Gestapo force, or that they are an illegitimate police force, it's because these people don't actually want to enforce the law at all. They will say the same thing about police in America. It's systemically racist. They believe that having borders and enforcing immigration law is inherently systemically racist. They want to burn down the system, and so they will use people, normies as we call them, to be able to push and foment a narrative that is emotionally based. And so if they can say, this could have been you, this could have been you. And the truth of the matter is, it wouldn't be most people. You said, Walter, that, you've never been asked to get out of a vehicle, by law enforcement command. I have been multiple times, actually, at gunpoint, and I was never shot. And why was I never shot? Because I literally listened and complied. And it wasn't because I was doing a bunch of bad things. One case, literally, one instance was, there was a guy that I was riding in a car with, and he literally had a cigarette lighter that was shaped like a firearm, and it was small. Like, it was like a microscopic, but he was pointing it at the window when they were driving past cars. And so someone called and said that someone was pointing a gun at them. And so, again, got the commands, put my hands up, open up the car door. Never did I think, I'm going to run. I complied. Did I get put on the ground? Sure. Was the situation handled? Yes. Did I go to jail? No. But that's just the truth, is that most people in that situation, if they weren't doing anything that they felt the need to run, would not run. People that run, like 99.9%, are because they're doing something wrong. Is that a reason to execute them? No. But once you start to take off, the act in and of itself, and this is the other lie that is being pushed, that you can flee and not be shot. Well, sure. But if you flee and turn your vehicle into a giant, massive death machine, that is what actually happened. So again, the left will say this narrative of that, oh, she was just trying to escape. So I know that, David, you wanted to show the footage from the officer. I believe he's already, we're not doxing him, but Officer Ross, I believe, is the name, and it's his cell phone footage.
Yeah, and I will say, Officer Ross, American hero. He was out there. He was doing his job. He was obeying his orders. And I actually, because I took some time to kind of take some notes on this. We'll watch it through in its entirety, and then I kind of want to break down some of the various laws that were broken as things were happening, and kind of get Representative Hudson's take on it and your take. And you can correct me if I'm wrong on any of these, but go ahead and play it for us, AM.
I'm not mad at you. Show your face. I'm That's okay. We don't change our plates every morning, just so you know. It'll be the same plate when you come talk to us later. That's fine. U.S. citizen, former.
Actually, pause it right there for me real quick. You know what I found interesting is that the wife's footage was never leaked to the press. It was all the bystanders further away that couldn't hear what was being done and what was being said. And I read something recently interesting that was like, there's a reason for that, because that would have very clearly painted the picture that they were in the wrong. AM, you can go ahead and press play.
Want to come at us? I say go get yourself some lunch, big boy. Go ahead.
Out of the car. Get out of the car. Get out of the car.
All right. So I'm going to have you go back to the beginning of the exchange. Or go, yeah, right there is good, like around 0.6. So first off, we have somebody blocking traffic. They presumably they have people detained in the back seats of their vehicles. So that's interference with a search and seizure, interfering with an arrest. Those are crimes. They actually give her an out and tell her to move, as she refuses to move. So now that's failure to comply. Then they tell her to get out. You can go ahead. You can play it as I'm talking, AM. That's fine. Then they tell her to get out. The other two officers come up and tell her to get out of the vehicle because now she's under arrest.
So you know, it'll be
She
the same
refuses
plate
to
when
get
you
out of
come
the
talk
car.
to us later. That's
So now
fine.
that's
US citizen,
resisting
former.
arrest. And then she puts the car in gear,
wanna come
lines
at
it up
us?
with
I
the
said go get
officer
yourself some
on
lunch,
the
big
video,
boy. Go ahead.
and then hits him. And that's assault with a deadly weapon, attempted vehicular, something, reckless endangerment for sure. But that's the thing we're not going to hear about from the legacy media is the litany of crimes that happened in the span of 15 to 20 seconds. All you're going to hear about is that shoot, this was an innocent lady, and no, there's a litany of crimes. And if she had complied, right now there'd be like 7 GoFundMe's going for her legal defense because she'd be behind bars, but she would at least still be with us.
Yeah,
She still would have gotten to make her statement. She still would have got to do what she was doing, even though it's illegal, but she'd be in jail.
Yeah, and a couple of just point out one thing, a narrative that's coming from the left that I've seen sharing, that I've seen shared a ton of times is that because she said, what'd she say? She was like, at the very beginning, she's like, well, that's fine, dude, or whatever, as though that's like a defense because she was blocking traffic and impeding in an operation, and she was like, hey, I'm fine, dude. Like that is a defense. And again, this is what the left does. They'll try and use these emotional appeals to make you, somehow believe that, yeah, like if you're acting like a psychopath and you are impeding in a law enforcement, but you do it with a smile on your face, like that means that you had no ill intention. Like clearly her intention by blocking her car was to stop the lawful actions of federal law enforcement. Like there's just no question, but I just wanted to point that out, that the left has been sharing these videos of like the words that she said versus what the actions of the officer. And I just think it's absurd. From your perspective, Walter, when you saw that video, what did that do for you? Do you think that just helped further solidify what you had already kind of came to before, or were you kind of open-minded before you saw the Officer Ross's cell phone footage?
Well, I mean, I started from the presumption of the officers acted appropriately because 99% of the time that's the case. And so, yeah, it just solidified what I already presumed to be true. But let's go back to that point that you made about the left categorically, from top to bottom, whether it's informal or formal, people in elected office like Walls, Fry, Ilhan Omar, or the media, or whoever it is, suggesting that it's somehow okay to commit crimes if you do it with a smile on your face. Everybody in that category, whether they're a journalist or an elected official, has a moral responsibility to, number one, uphold the law, first and foremost. Number two, to not endanger people by misinforming them about how the law works. And these people know what they're doing. If they don't, then they should all be fired from whatever job they have. Are you kidding me? You're in a position of influence and authority and you don't know what the law is or how people should act in society as they go about their day in the public, you shouldn't be where you're at then. So those are the only two possibilities. Either you know that all of these crimes that we just observed are in fact crimes and that you should not engage in them and you should not advise people to engage in them, or you're completely incompetent to either be a journalist or a public official. That's the state of things on the left. And in that context, I'm telling you, like if I feel this frustrated, I can only imagine how the average person feels. And my level of frustration is at the point where it's like, look, I want to see people who never thought they would face any consequences for saying this kind of stuff put in prison for decades. I want the signal to be sent loud and clear nationally that we are not playing anymore, that the summer of love is never going to happen again, and anybody who tries to foment it is going to lose their life, if not literally, then certainly in the form of being in prison for decades. The consequences need to be harsh. We need to get wild, wild west. We need to get medieval on these people because they clearly will not stop.
Yeah, I think, listen, you to that point, the back end of this has to be that we don't just feel righteous or vindicated on the right, that the left's narrative didn't produce more violent, destructive riots like during the summer of George Floyd riots. I think it has to be that people, elected officials specifically as well, that are fomenting these types of dangerous, violent actions need to be held legally accountable. But at the least, the people that continually go out there and are blocking roads, like how many videos have you seen in Minneapolis since that shooting of people literally standing in front of ICE vehicles with their cell phone and then just getting tossed to the side? Like, it makes me laugh. Like, I like seeing some soy boy get just trucked by an ICE agent as much as the next guy.
Start eating protein and that won't happen to you.
I want them to get arrested and go to prison. That's what that's what we need, right?
Yeah.
Because we have to set an example that you can't just do this. I mean, there was this crazy, and this is a different story that I don't know if I'll have time to touch on, but basically there was a police chief of a department that literally said that she doesn't recognize the legitimacy of ICE. It's like, literally, Congress passed a law to designate Department of Homeland Security after 9/11 to create the ICE agency. Like, to say that you don't recognize it, like, there has to be some type of consequence. I mean, you're free to say what you want to say to a certain degree, right? We have freedom of speech, but it's just, again, it emboldens people, and there has to be some way. I don't know. I don't have the answers. Maybe you have some insight, Walter, because I know that you're a guy that strongly, you stand on liberty, principles, and values very, very strongly. What do you do when you have elected officials that are, for all intents and purposes, fomenting people to go and break the law? Are they still tiptoeing enough around that the only way to remove them is, politically at the ballot box? Or are there things that you guys have had conversations with that you could potentially create language that stops that? I mean, again, the reality of where we are in Minnesota, politically passing that is not there yet. We have to win some stuff first, but yeah.
I don't think it's a matter of if there not being a legal basis for holding these people criminally accountable for the rhetoric that they're spewing. I think so like, imagine, right? Let's pick a Republican governor. Let's say Abbott in Texas were to go on TV and start telling people that, it's okay if you just go into the bank and slip a note to the teller and demand a bunch of money. I mean, that's your right as an American. It's free speech to say, hey, give me all your money. If you were to mislead people in that way and somebody were to act upon it, you could make the case that he's guilty of criminal conspiracy. I mean, he's sitting there from a position of power encouraging people to engage in a crime. That's exactly what's happening here with Tim Walz and Jacob Fry, Ilhan Omar, and the rest of them. They are actively encouraging people to engage in crime. And more than that, when you look at these executives like Jacob Fry or Tim Walz, Jacob Fry he literally told a federal agency to get the F out of town. That is insurrectionist language. His department has conscientiously chosen not to respond to emergencies when the caller is a federal agent, okay, that's discrimination. And I would frame it as insurrection through inaction, right? Like it's borderline treasonous. And then you got Tim Walz talking about how he's going to mobilize the National Guard to go to war with the feds. How is that not insurrection? How is that not treason? And so I think that we already have the statutory framework in order to hold these people accountable. What we apparently lack is the political will to actually do it. And would it be inflammatory? Sure. Would people get all upset? Absolutely. What are the consequences of not doing it? We've seen that. What are the consequences of continuing to allow people to get away with this nonsense time after time after time? Somebody like Renee Good, she probably woke up that morning thinking, oh, I'm going to go have some fun and virtue signal and, go out there and, get my 15 minutes impeding ICE. And then I'm going to go to the daycare, and then I'm going to go to my job, and then I'm going to wake up tomorrow morning and go have a latte, right? People need to get it in their heads that if you do this sort of thing, you're not going to have a latte tomorrow. You're going to be behind bars for a good long time. That's what people need to realize in order to stop doing this nonsense. And it's the obligation of us, the folks who have power right now and can execute it, to actually bring that into manifestation.
Yeah, David, I know you probably have some closing thoughts on specifically this issue in regards to, again, the Renee Good shooting and the response that's coming, whether it's from the left or the right, and then we'll move on to talk about Walter's trip to D.C., which in and of itself was so fascinating. It's just crazy how the news cycle will down to certain things and other things almost feel like they disappear. But yeah, man, some final thoughts on this topic before we move on.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you guys hit on a really important thing of we have freedom of speech, but you don't have freedom from consequences. And thanks to 4 years of Joe Biden and no enforcement of law, very weak policies, no enforcement of the border, we've lived in a consequence-free society for 4 years. And between that, COVID, and the George Floyd riots, we taught people that they can do whatever they want and there's no consequences. And unfortunately, that's just not the case. And unfortunately for Renee Good, she learned that the hard way. I actually have, and I've been wrestling with this for the last couple of days, as the more news was coming out and more footage and things were coming out about this. There's this really unfortunate thing that seems to happen with the left as a movement. They find people that are in a weak and a vulnerable place, and they get in there and they play on those emotions to get them sold into their vision. I mean, you see that with like Tyler Robinson, right? He grew up in a conservative home, as far as we can tell, like a relatively Christian home. And, he goes off to college, gets indoctrinated, ends up dating a furry, gay, trans, whatever, all of the letters person, and then ends up, shooting at Charlie Kirk. And then you have someone like Renee Good, who she was married, she had a husband, he passed away tragically. She's a widow, she's got a child. She ends up in a relationship with somebody else. As far as we understand, she has 2 other children. There's been unverifiable things that have come out about that, so I'm not going to speak on that. But now here she is in Minneapolis, moved here from Missouri. Tim Pool covered it. It seems like that might have also been paid for by Ice Watch to move her here. That's not the person, from the start of the story that had a husband and a family and, and probably had some decent values to where, they took advantage of a widow, right? Played on, wherever she was mentally at the time with that kind of loss, to where you have somebody who's willing to put her life on the line and get in between ICE agents and act like her life doesn't have value, or that their lives don't have value, that it's okay to run them over. And I just, kind of like with what Musk said, about us needing to stand up to the woke mind virus and destroy it, because it is destroying lives. I don't think that, that was the path her life was headed on if she hadn't ended up, getting in these circles where she ultimately ended up. And I think that's like the most gracious thing I can say about the situation is the whole thing's unfortunate, but it seems like she maybe didn't start her life out as the sort of person that would have done what she was doing that day.
Yeah, no, I think that's an excellent point. Overarching, there's so many different perspectives to be able to try and understand why people see this so differently. Like, to me, what I've always tried to approach these topics and issues with is like, even though I don't agree with these other perspectives, like I think that they, in certain cases, like are truly in a fantastical fake reality that you cannot justify, but I still try and understand how can they come to this point. And I often will come back to a lot of these people that believe these things have been manipulated. They are mentally broken. They are spiritually broken. They have deranged tendencies that have been whipped up. Some of it might just be a fundamental difference in world or moral views. And I understand that that is a real thing that exists. Different people have different moral standards. But I do think that you're right that a lot of these organizations, and I made a post on X about it, I think that they're literally evil. I think that a group like Ice Watch is evil. I think that they prey on women especially that are susceptible to these types of things. And they kind of ingrain this idea of, you know, white guilt and out-group preference. And they weaponize that. Like there's this post that went around that, you know, trains these women, whether they're teachers or their moms or whatever, and trains them to go out there and put their white bodies in front of law enforcement. And so I think that that's just kind of a good point to end on, is that, you know, we need to be able to have the ability to see what the larger perspective is from the left. And I think that we've been able to effectively push back on a lot of these narratives. It doesn't mean that, you know, it's over or by any stretch of the imagination. This thing could blow up tomorrow night. I pray and hope that it doesn't. I hope that we kind of just realize that this is what the left is going to do. They're going to continue to push this envelope, and even potentially the diversity of tactics here is that they just want to radicalize more people so the next person goes and forfeits their life in a tragic, gruesome, brutal way. But that's kind of my final thoughts. If you have anything else that you wanted to add, Walter, before we move off this topic, we're going to next talk about your trip to DC. But any final thoughts on this story so far?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think it's what's implicit in what you just said is that they don't care about Renee Good whatsoever. They don't care about the lives that they're putting in danger. And you know, as an elected official, as somebody who has influence, like I have to think about, you know, what's the actual impact of the things that I'm suggesting or saying, and you know, how are people gonna take the things that I say, and what actions are they going to engage in as a result? And certainly there are times and have been times where there have been attempts to make false connections between some rhetoric that I put out there and an unrelated action that somebody took. But in this case, it's very specifically, I mean, you're telling them to break the law. They're doing it, defying law enforcement, and then getting killed as a result. That's on you. That blood is on your hands as a Democrat who's encouraging people to go out there. And they don't care at all. They're not losing a wink of sleep. This has no impact upon their soul, which, you know, raises the question of whether or not they ever had one.
Yeah, very, very true. So, yeah, changing gears here in direction. You went out to Washington, D.C. You testified before the Oversight Committee on, you know, some people are claiming, and I think it's unfair to claim that this, you know, the incidents of Renee Good would have never happened if Nick Shirley would not have come to Minnesota. And so some people are like trying to make this correlation that this is all Nick Shirley's fault, which of course this is how the left operates, right? Well, but I do think that, you know, you especially, Walter, have been on top of this issue like so many others here in the Twin Cities, talking about the fraud and being part of the Oversight Committee, right? And having these conversations and saying like, my goodness, like, we have a fraud problem. And so I just kind of want to kind of paint the backstory of how this committee hearing and this testimony kind of unfolded and just kind of get your perspective. So just kind of like the 30,000-foot view, we have something called the Congressional Oversight Committee. It's one of the committees in Congress, and they, you know, handle a whole host of different issues that have to do with public interest and the good of the American people. And in this case, there's a $9 billion plus potential dollar fraud operation that's been occurring in Minnesota, and you have been on one of the fraud committees here in Minnesota in our local body. So just kind of walk me through, when were you first notified that the oversight committee was going to have this hearing, and how did you kind of prepare for it, and did you bill the Minnesota taxpayers $500,000 to prepare, like Tim Walz?
I got a call out of the blue, New Year's Eve. I'm up at the family cabin, recognized the name, had never talked to the guy before, and he's a high-level staffer with the House Oversight Committee in D.C. And it's, hey, how you doing? Been wanting to talk to you for a while, yada, yada. Oh, by the way, would you be interested in flying to D.C. to testify before the House Oversight Committee about all this fraud? And, of course, I play it cool, like, well, let me check my schedule. But yeah, I was thrilled. It was such an honor to be asked to do that. And so made the arrangements, flew out there, and the experience itself was, it's surreal, right? Let me tell you just how surreal it was. So I get on the airplane to leave the Twin Cities to fly DC. And I'm on Delta, and they got these cool little deals in the back of the seat where you can watch TV or movies or whatever. I flip on Fox News as I'm taking off, and I'm watching Dustin Gragey and Michael Holmstrom, who are two of my buddies from out here in Wright County. Holmstrom just got elected to the state Senate, and of course Gragey is rabble rouser on X, up and comer, making all kinds of noise on national media. I'm watching these two talk about the topic that I'm flying out to DC to testify before Congress for. It doesn't get any more surreal than that. And then you get out there, and of course you're meeting all these people who you've seen for years, whether it's Jim Jordan or Anna Paulina or
Anna Paulina Luna.
Anna Paulina Luna, yeah, and Bo Burt and the rest. And on the other side too, like I got to argue with Ayanna Pressley. That was cool, I met some dude named Frost, who's apparently a congressman out of Florida who I had never heard of before. And, I slapped him around a little bit. That was fun. And just for me, I try to, because it's not like my first rodeo, right? Like this was definitely the most high profile thing I've ever done. But everything you've done before kind of prepares you. And my attitude, like people kept asking me, are you nervous? Are you concerned? And I was just like, no, because these are just people. Everybody involved is just people, from the staffers to the Congress people to the media. We're all people, and people are the same.
Yeah, what I was gonna say is, like, when watching, and we're gonna play a video here of your exchange. But I just gotta say, man, watching how you handled the testimony back and forth, I was like, get him, Walter, get him, because like Maxwell Frost, right? That's the congressman from Florida. He annoys me so greatly. Like he's one of the true believers, right? Dyed in the wool leftist, right? And it's just like going back and forth. And again, with Ayanna Pressley as well, like she really thought she had you, man. And it's just like, you've been here before. Like you know exactly what you're talking about. I'm kind of curious. So like preparation, like how do you prepare for something like that? I'm super curious.
This was more entertaining than the last Logan Paul fight, I will say.
So I mean, with preparation, you're primarily concerned about ensuring that you have the answer to relevant questions, right? So I mean, if you go in there, like if you just look at how congressional testimony is structured, and that's where I started. Where I started was, how does this work? I've never testified before Congress before. What should I expect as a witness? What's the decorum? What are the protocols, the expectations? What kind of questions am I likely to be asked? And just understanding the format, I think, was more important than even having content to talk about. But then beyond that, it's you're not going to have an opportunity as a witness to cast a narrative beyond your opening statement. Like your opening statement is really the only time where you get to say what you want to say for 5 minutes straight. Otherwise, you are subject to the whims of the members of the committee. On both sides of the aisle, Republican and Democrat, whatever question they're asking it because they want to put a brick in a narrative that they've already built, right? And so you have to navigate that where and this is where like my radio experience comes into play, being able to manage a clock, right? is that they only got 5 minutes. And so if they ask you a question that you could go off for 15 minutes about, you need to figure out a way to distill it down to 15 seconds so that they can continue to make whatever point it is they're going to make. That's, on the Republican side. Now, I'd be happy to provide that service to Democrats too. The problem is that I wasn't once, and neither were either of my colleagues, asked a question from a Democrat that was posed in a sense of genuine curiosity or a desire to understand what's going on in our state. I mean, they all came in there as if they already know all the details and don't need us for anything except to use as props. And that's fine as long as you do it within the constraints of decorum. But Presley and Frost decided that they were going to have a bad day, and I was more than happy to serve it to them.
Yeah, and so like that's, I think you touched on a couple of key points. Like for your preparation, like you already know the information. Like you're already good on it, and really what it comes down to is just understanding the dynamic that exists. Some people I think have this idea that you just can go on and just start wiling out. It's like, no, the committee is in charge, but you do get a chance to respond, and I think that there is an art form to it. And I think that you actually do a super, super great job at it. So I'm going to play just a little bit of an exchange between you and Representative Frost.
Age in the silly condemnation.
Let me see here. You know what? My audio is not plugged in correctly. So, David, while I get my audio. Oh, you heard it?
Yeah, I
Okay,
heard
all
it
right,
too.
all right,
Yeah,
all right.
I heard it.
I was gonna say I heard
Let
it.
me. All right.
No. This is not. No. This is not silly. This is the
what
president.
did you have to say about the
Hey, my time.
assassination
I'll
of Charlie
reclaim my
Kirk?
time. I'll reclaim
What did you
my
have to
time.
say about Jay
I'll reclaim
Jones,
my
who's the
time.
chief
I'll
law
reclaim my
enforcement
time.
officer
I'll reclaim
in the
my
state
time.
of Virginia,
I'll reclaim my time.
fantasizing
I'll
about
reclaim my
shooting
time.
Republicans
I will
and
reclaim
watching
my
kids
time.
die
The gentleman
in their
will
mother's
stop
arms.
talking
I'm not
on
playing
my
this game
time.
in
The
that
gentleman will
context.
stop talking on my time.
President Trump reposted conspiracy theories on his Truth Social account about the murder of Minnesota state legislators Mark and Melissa Hortman that suggests that Minnesota Governor Tim Walz had the Hortmans assassinated. Governor Walz says this behavior will get more innocent people killed, and the Hortman children have come out on the president and said and called on the president to take the statements down. I think it is very important that we are very clear that we condemn this type of behavior. So I just want to go down the line and hear if you agree with the Hortman children that we should condemn, and we ask the president to take down this post.
No, I just want to pause it right there for a second. So, like, this is what the left does, is like they're gonna frame this way of like, do you condemn this? Because they want to get you to get the soundbite so they can actually try and use it against you later. But I think you had an amazing response to this. So,
Mr.
Well, and before
No,
we
go
go
ahead,
any
Walter.
further,
yeah.
before we go any further, let me ask, what the hell does this have to do with fraud?
Right.
That was actually my first. Yeah, as we were playing this, I'm like, this guy
What does
has
this
not
have to
asked
do
one
with
question about
And-
money.
And the great irony about both this and the Presley interaction is I freaking called it in my opening statement. I literally said, we're going to have people distract, defer, go to personalities, go to irrelevant topics, and then these clowns just oblige. It was just amazing.
Yeah, I'm gonna play the rest of this here.
Yes. Representative.
So as the longest serving member on this panel of Minnesota, I am so offended that anybody would accuse anybody of the assassination other than Lance Bolter, because this,
Said.
I said what I said. I think that it's beyond the pale that anybody talk
Okay,
about
you can't
anyone
come to call on the
murdering-
president, take down the post. So it's okay.
anybody
We'll move on.
assassinating
Representative
Melissa
Hudson,
Hortman
we'll move on.
except
Thank you,
for
ma'am.
Lance
Thank you, ma'am. We'll move on. You can't call on the president, take down this post. We'll move on to Representative.
See, and like that's the thing, right? So regardless of what you think of Representative Rarick's response, like at the end of the day, like she's saying like, hey, this is what I believe. It's Vance Belter.
Right.
But this idea that you can frame it in a way to say like, I demand the president take down this post. It's like it's such an absurd thing. But yeah, I didn't have it queued up exactly at the right spot, but let me continue forward.
Hudson. It's just a yes or no.
I cannot deceive the committee by giving it a binary. I have spoken to this many times. I have renounced the content of these ridiculous conspiracy theories, and I've called them ridiculous on multiple
That's
occasions.
great. Do you think it's appropriate for the President of the United States?
I
to
am
repost
not
it?
going to engage in the silly condemnation game.
No.
in
This
a
is not.
context-
No.
In a
This is not
context-
silly. This is the
What
president.
did you have to say about the
Hey, my
assassination
time. I'll
of Charlie
reclaim my
Kirk?
time. I'll reclaim
What did you
my
have to say
time.
about Jay
I'll reclaim
Jones,
my
who's the
time.
chief
I'll
law
reclaim my
enforcement
time.
officer
I'll reclaim
in the
my
state
time.
of Virginia,
I'll reclaim my time.
fantasizing
I'll
about
reclaim my
shooting
time.
Republicans
I will
and
reclaim
watching
my
kids
time.
die
The gentleman
in their
will
mother's
stop
arms.
talking.
I love that, man. That's just like I said, man. Like
He was
the
so
way that you
desperate because he
handled
was
that
not
was
talking.
just, dude, it was gangster. And you know, hats off. I mean, you did exactly what I knew that you are capable of. For the audience, like Walter has been a guy that I've actually looked up to in the world of politics ever since I first heard about him actually back in the day, because you used to do like a column every once in a while with like PJ Media, right? Like back in the day, and then you know you had a show on Twin Cities News Talk called Closing Argument that I always liked. And yeah, man, like you just crushed it, dude. Like it was so good. But yeah, man, I mean, what, you know, to kind of move off of that specific interaction, like how did you feel in that moment? Like, does this kind of even spur you further to being like, yeah, man, like you can see yourself in Congress being one of these people that tussles, or, you know, because I think this is what happens, right? Like, yeah, you're a state rep, and it's an amazing thing to be, but Congress is like a whole different beast. But it's like you held your own, man. And so I'm just curious, like if like personally deep down, it's like, yeah, man, like I knew I had the stuff, and when put up to the task, like, yeah, I got it.
Well, I mean, I didn't think of it in terms of. Let's put it this way: the status that I tried to bring into that room was not the status of a future congressperson, or the status of a state representative, or the status of an up-and-coming media star, or anything like that. The status that I brought into that room was citizen.
Yeah.
Boss. I'm your boss. I'm coming to do an inspection of my house. That's the attitude that I brought into that room. And I'm more than happy to act with decorum and gentility and follow all the rules and address people by their titles and all of that, so long as we're, you know, not even necessarily operating in good faith, but at least being somewhere in the vicinity of fair, right? Like there were people who went off on ridiculous screeds. There was some guy who rambled on about the Trump Kennedy Center for 5 minutes. I don't know what that has to do with fraud in Minnesota or Somalis or anything that we were there to talk about, but that's how he chose to use his time. Great. I'm not going to talk over while he's doing that. But Ayanna Pressley trying to put words in my mouth and call me and my colleagues cowards. This Frost trying to first of all, making reference to a personal relationship that each of us three have or had with Speaker Emeritus Melissa Hortman. We knew her as a person. He didn't. How dare you leverage that relationship to try to make a political point? And then the way he did it, where he's trying to pigeonhole us into an inaccurate characterization of what we actually believe. Screw you. Like there's a certain red line past which I don't care what the rules of Congress are. Go ahead and do me a favor and drag me out of Congress. Okay? All right? But you're not going to get the rest of your time once you cross that red line, because I can talk louder and better and longer. Okay? You're not going to beat me. And again, it's not because I'm this great grandiose person. It's because I'm a citizen of the United States of America. I'm your boss. I will not be disrespected. Neither will my constituents, and neither will the American people.
No, man, that's why I tremendously respect what you did out there. And personally, I've always thought, seeing you at whether it's a statewide position or in Congress, it was always something that I just think you would be an amazing representative for the people, because that's just the way that you take it. You're not a person that's seeking power or status for the purpose of power or status. You just want to be able to be as effective as possible, and sometimes that means being elected to be the best voice for the people and to be the most effective. David, what are your thoughts? Any things that you wanted to ask Walter in regards to his trip out to Washington, D.C. on the Oversight Committee and and more specifically, or even you can be more pointed about Walter's perspective on the fraud itself. But yeah, anything you want to throw out there for Walter?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, a couple of things. One, I love where we ended the video with the frozen look on his face. You could just tell how desperate he was to get you to stop talking. Two, that man's tie is all jacked up, and you know me. They call me the Peruvian gentleman. Ties are very important to me. Being well dressed is important to me to a certain degree. And if you can't tie a tie, and you've been working in government that long, what are you doing? Like that immediately just That's a side note for me, my own personal bias when it comes to listening to people talk. If you've got a crooked tie, or it looks like you had your son tie it for you and he's 3, it's terrible. But anyways, so back to this. I have one question. Did anyone actually discuss any real fraud? And did you get to bring up the $700 million that we've talked about going in suitcases out of the Minneapolis airport from back to Somalia? Did anybody actually talk about fraud with you?
Yeah, Republicans did. The suitcase story, the most recent one, it hadn't come out yet, so we didn't talk about that in particular. Of course, I
actually have that if AM wants to put that up.
Yeah, there are other suitcase stories that could be talked about, but yeah, I mean, only the Republicans seem to be interested in talking about what the subject of the committee hearing was, which is the fraud ongoing in Minnesota. The only thing Democrats would say about it is what even Jacob Fry is now saying. Like the way they try to put up this disclaimer that they're taking the problem seriously is they'll say something like, oh, well, nobody likes fraud and we're certainly against criminal fraud and we should definitely have prosecutions. But Trump, Trumpity, Trump. Like then they just deviate into some irrelevant nonsense to do everything but talk about the fraud. And so they try to cover themselves at the front end by acknowledging, yeah, we should probably do something about that fraud stuff. And then they just sidetrack into the partisan nonsense, which was very...
I actually have a question for you about that, with kind of tying in the last story we covered with obviously the riots that are coming out of the shooting that happened. I had this thought, and you can tell me if I'm way off base or if I'm just reading the tea leaves and going nuts or something. But I think that anybody that's actually guilty of fraud in this state, potentially the governor, whoever's hand was in the cookie jar, if you will, that's worried about getting caught. I see them using the riots as a great time to clear a bunch of evidence. I think if we get to a place where people are smashing windows and burning buildings, I think a lot of the buildings that are mysteriously going to disappear are going to be all those Somali daycares.
A bunch of child cares.
Yeah, just a bunch of random buildings, or like those medical transportation companies that had vans that didn't move for a year. I have this weird suspicion, and obviously this is all just theory. I'm not alleging anything, YouTube. Yeah. That there's going to be certain people that are going to use kind of all of this so that we never actually get to the bottom of any of that fraud. And do you think that there's a potential for that? Obviously, I don't want to put you in a position where you're saying something that could has negative political whatever, but I don't know if you've read into any of that at all.
No, I mean, that thought didn't occur to me, but it's certainly... Let's put it this way. If that were to happen, if we were to wake up one day and there was the winter of love and a bunch of stuff burned down, and after the fact we assessed the situation and figured out that mysteriously the overwhelming majority of the buildings that burned down were connected in one way or another to Medicaid waiver programs, let's just say I wouldn't be shocked. I would laugh my ass off because they have... That's the type of brazenness that we've seen, right? Like the degree of shamelessness and the sloppy nature in which they've conducted these schemes, where it's like they're not even trying to hide what they're doing. They're just out there in the open. I mean, go back to Feeding Our Future. They're buying luxury homes. They're buying luxury cars. They're going on vacations. They're sending money to Somalia. Not even under some assumed name or through some pass-through entity. Just like me on the paper and shipping it off. I mean, the level of brazenness / stupidity, I don't know what it is just off the charts. So that would certainly be consistent with what we've seen so far.
You know, one of the things that is so fascinating in regards to you going out, testifying part of the oversight committee. Obviously, again, shout out to so many of the people that have been working on these stories, such as Bill Glahn over at Center of the American Experiment. You know, Liz Collin, Alpha News. They've been talking and having conversations, and specifically, like again, the story gets out there for people that live in Minneapolis, St. Paul area. But like, if you go back and you watch, you know, in Minnesota State Legislature, the fraud committee meeting and having hearings, and you're in these conversations, right? And you are in the committee. Like, there are things that were proposed by your committee that Democrats completely shut down and would not support. And so that's the thing that people, I think, you know, when you get a sensational story, like, again, Nick Shirley, I'm glad he came to Minnesota. I think that it 100%, you can say that having this giant national spotlight was in part due to Nick Shirley coming to Minnesota. Like, that was like the final catalyst that really launched this. But all of it's predicated really on work that was done even by David, right? David, I don't know how he pronounced his last name, Hawk. And in the work that he had been doing to pull this information from, you know, various sources. But my point is, with your trip out to DC, and my question, do you feel that this will actually lead to arrests, indictments of any elected official or administrative officials? Do you think that being part of this oversight committee will lead to that? I mean, I've heard rumors or even seen some stories of criminal indictments potentially, or at least criminal referrals, not indictments, referrals to the Department of Justice. I'm just kind of curious your perspective, being that you've been in the mix for so long of the fraud, and you know, you've heard testimony from people talking about the fraud. So,
well, first of all, let me address kind of what's sort of implied but not stated in your question, which is people are frustrated by the hearings and the speeches and the Fox News hits and, you know, all the talking, the strongly worded letters, and not seeing consequences, not seeing people held to account. I get that frustration. I share that frustration. Ever since during the George W. Bush trifecta, where all we got out of it was Medicare Part D, I've been right there ready to become, you know, a rabble-rousing liberté activist, wanting to burn the party down as a result. It's like, what is the point of electing these people if they're not going to do anything? I get that sentiment. What I will tell you is that this House Oversight Committee hearing was not just a dog and pony show. It was that, but it was more than that. And the reason why is because Congress has the ability to do things that we don't here in Minnesota. So here in Minnesota, the House Fraud Prevention and State Agency Oversight Committee, we cannot subpoena people. We don't have subpoena power. We can't make criminal referrals, right? Like it's all we can do is talk. That's all we can do. All we can do is pull people before us. They're not sworn. They're not under oath. So we can't catch them on perjury if we catch them in a lie, right? All of that is different in Congress. In Congress, you are under oath. You attest to the truthfulness of what it is that you're saying. In Congress, they can subpoena your ass. In Congress, they can refer you for criminal prosecution. That is meaningful. And those motions were made while we were sitting there in DC. And they will continue to be made. And talking, you know, behind the scenes with folk, not directly with these investigators, but with people who know what's going on. This is not just a dog and pony show. Things are moving. And the very story we started off with here tonight, the fact that there's 2,000 ICE agents in Minneapolis is a testament to that. We're not playing. The Trump administration is not playing. And I personally think, both for moral and political reasons, there have to be high-profile arrests this year. Sooner the better. And not just one, several. Like, again, the signal must be sent that playtime is over. That if you think you're going to be able to leverage your position in order to game the system, to make your friends rich, or get yourself political campaign contributions, have fun thinking that you're going to spend the next 40 years looking at a concrete wall and nobody's coming to save you.
Yeah, and I think to kind of wrap on this point, I think it is important more than anything that people understand that there has to be consequences. And go after the fraudsters, man. Like, I don't care if you get 1,000 fraudsters arrested. I just don't believe it's possible, and this is my personal opinion, that this much fraud can occur without some form of government corruption or malfeasance, that people should be held legally liable for, whether they are elected officials or administrators. And I think if we don't get that, that is a very, very bad mark, I think, because it's just too unbelievable. Now, I will accept there's a small sliver, very, very small sliver. If a thorough investigation is conducted, they're very public about, hey, these are just a bunch of morons. It's all mismanagement. Minnesota is full of a bunch of administrative officials that just poorly mismanaged all of this, and this is why all this fraud occurred. And you can show me the evidence that is the case, then sure. But I just don't believe that it's possible. I just don't believe that having this much fraud, I think it's by design, and that's why people need to be held accountable. But to kind of move off of that, David, any final thoughts that you have on Walter's big trip to DC? And I just want to be able to move into talking with you, Walter, about what you're currently doing, what you have going on in the future, and just kind of give you space and opportunity to talk about what you got going on in your life. But yeah, any closing thoughts, David, on Walter's big trip to DC?
Yeah, no, it was refreshing to see, and it's actually encouraging because I think, if you listen to certain conservative podcasters like, AK and I are so I would say I'm probably a little bit more of a fan, but you've also interacted with him more. Like we're decently tied in with like what Jeremy from over in Wisconsin on the quartering talks about, and he's got this phrase he likes to use, which is the "nothing ever happens club," and we're hoping that that's not the case when it comes to all of this. But before we jump into the next segment, I just wanted to kind of look through our comments here. The chat's been active. It looks like Matt just threw in Walter Hudson for governor and AK for lieutenant governor. I think that is a capital idea. Someone make that a t-shirt or something. Mac Fisher 4004 said, when we use the term fraud, our attention goes towards the bad actors on the street. I think we should use maladministration and breach of trust. Let me see here. Oh, we have from Jesse Tufty. Can we talk about what's happening within the healthcare system and illegal aliens and the fraud there? They are getting free care. I don't think anyone really understands what's happening there. I will say I am looking into that because I have heard some stuff about that. Let's see. Joey says, stupid games get stupid prizes. I think that's in regards to our first story. Chris says, social media is so toxic. More people to people conversation. It's not a black and white situation. And Ryan Fredden 2298 said, is there real precedence to denaturalize Somalians and remove them from the U.S.? And could we prosecute school administrators for obstructing ICE by allowing these school walkouts? Those are great questions. Do you have anything on any of those questions there that we got hit with, Walter?
Well, I would need to know more details. I mean, some of that stuff I haven't heard about how the walkouts connect to obstruction of ICE. That doesn't make a whole
I think it's because a lot of those
sense.
students then end up showing up at protests. So the theory is that the schools were letting them all out so they could go protest them because, teachers union being left leaning.
Yeah, that's a hard thing to prove. That's a hard thing to demonstrate. I mean, they can always say, "Oh no, we were doing this for the safety of the kids because we didn't know what was going to happen." But even that is damning, right? It's like, what an indictment of your city. Oh, we can't do school. Our kids can't read or do math. 50% of them at grade level. We're going to cancel.
But we're going to tell them to go throw rocks.
Well, and even if you're not telling them to go throw rocks, we're going to cancel school because our city's so inept and incompetent that we can't trust them to protect us in this time during this political discourse. It's just absurd.
Yeah, and listen, thanks for people suggesting a Hudson Kamara ticket. I love Walter. I have zero interest in running for public office at this time. Maybe when I'm older. It's not my thing, man. I'm too much of a free spirit.
Think of the hat budget you would have.
Yeah, the hat budget would be absurd. I like I said earlier, I think Walter has a future of either being governor or a congressman or senator representing the good people of Minnesota, 100%. I would also say to Jesse's question about the fraud occurring in the medical field, yeah, I mean, that's, you know, whether you're talking about Medicaid, waivered services, obviously that's been a huge component of the fraud that's been happening. You know, Minnesota basically, you know, got rid of allowing adults that are legal aliens to be on Minnesota Care, but we still left in the portion of children. So 100%, I think that is fraudulently taken advantage of in so many different ways. But yeah, I mean, great comments. Please continue to drop comments. We'll read them as they pop up probably before the end of the show. Again, appreciate that. Make sure that you guys are dropping your thoughts. And as we continue to grow larger and larger, you know, and we can qualify for like super chats or, you know, the different mechanisms, we'll have to be more picky. But right now, if you throw a comment, it's probably getting read. So, Walter, kind of transitioning and moving forward, brother. What do you got going on, man? What is happening in the world of Walter Hudson? And you know, politically speaking, what type of moves are you preparing? What are you doing to continue to serve the people of Minnesota?
Well, it's interesting that somebody brought up the idea of me running for governor, right? I'll be real honest and open about that. It was considered, amongst other possibilities. And without going into all the details of how things went down, I have this belief in providence that God is constantly, you know, like putting the rock underneath your foot just before it falls in the water to keep you going in the path that he wants you to go, regardless of your intentions or desires or whatever. And so when something doesn't go the way you think it should or anticipate that it might, it's real easy to get disappointed or to say, well, that sucks that didn't happen. But in my case, almost every time when it's something big, I end up at some point down the road being like, oh, thank God that didn't happen. Thank God I'm where I'm at, doing what I'm doing. And that's very much how I feel right now, is that we've got 14 candidates for governor. 14. 2 of them come from my caucus. I put out a Sora AI video as a joke like a week or so ago, where it was like a newscast where the headline was all 67 House Republicans declare for governor, you know, because that's kind of how it feels right now, is that we're just, let's all do it. Like I actually texted Lisa Damuth and I'm like, well, we're just going to all go. I'm like, we're just all going to do it.
That would be incredible for all the wrong reasons.
Right. So what am I doing? Look, I'm running for re-election in the House. I guess this is the public announcement. I'm sure nobody's surprised by it, that I'm running for re-election to my current position in the House of Representatives. And other than that, I'm just going back to where I'm comfortable, which is being the commentator / activist, whatever you want to call it, where I see my role, and I've been changing the format of my YouTube channel to kind of fit this new brand, which is, you know, what is the unique value proposition that I can provide as a state representative, as somebody who's, you know, inside of the system. And I think what it is it's more than just, anybody can just like read the headline and react to it. This is what happened. This is what I think. Like, we can all do that. And if you've got a hot take, then yeah, maybe that's compelling. But I think the added dimension that I can provide is by giving people a backstage pass to process. This is how this works. This is why this is happening the way it is. And with the goal of kind of illuminating the mechanisms through which people are both being manipulated and how the mechanisms that they can utilize in order to make their own voice more powerful. And so that's kind of been the shift in focus from my work on YouTube. And it's taking up much more of my time, which is fine because I got plenty at the moment. Being out of session, we'll see what happens when I'm back in session. That's going to make things significantly more complicated. But yeah, I'm just continuing to talk to the people and continuing to try to educate. I want to try to get people out to caucus, not just for me. Yeah, sure, by all means, come out for me. That's awesome. But just so that they get involved, so they get vested, so they become part of the deal. Because I just think right now it's such an esoteric thing where the only people who are showing up are the people who already know how it works. And we just need some fresh blood, some new ideas, some youthful enthusiasm to kind of give us a little bit of a boost as a party. So those are kind of my focuses right now.
Yeah, and to that point, I'm the guy, right? Republican National Committee man. I'm statewide party official. I've been sharing for people to get out and go to caucus, but I do still think it's so fascinating. So, we've just had some of the biggest names, arguably, in right of center, but independent journalism, but that specifically leans right of center with Nick Shirley, Nick Sorter, Cam Higbee, right? Jack Posobiec was here, right? We've got these big names, and they come to Minnesota because we got this big story. And the thing that I find so fascinating is, like, when I talk to most of these people, or have the ability to talk through one of their people, like, none of them are interested in actual Republican Party politics. Like at all. Like, they're like, that's weird, that's lame, why would I do that? And when I went to this gala, right, again, it's a gala for a Catholic school, and just having conversations, again, like, people were genuinely, like, happy with the Trump impersonations, right? Like, they were having a good time. This is a right of center group. And I had a conversation with a guy, and I was like, have you ever thought about becoming active? And he's like, Republicans are weird, man. And I'm like, yeah, but the reason that you think that we're weird, like activists, is because you're not involved. Like, be active, get involved, and then the party will look more like you.
Right.
Like, and listen, I love all of our activists, but yeah, we're a lot of us hardcorers, we're weird. Yeah, of course we're weird because we really love politics, but we need people that just want to be good stewards of their community and just want to represent their slice of the world. And so if you're watching this, or if at some point you get to watch this and it's before caucus, and you think that, like, being a political activist is weird, that's only because you're not involved. I mean, get involved, and your party will start to reflect and look like you. And that's really what caucuses are about. It's saying, I will at least say that I will support the Republican Party's values. Like, that's an important part of this. You're like, don't come if you're a leftist. Don't come if you're like an independent-minded person that sometimes wants to support the Democrats. No, you have to be committed to saying, I'm going to support the Republicans. But if you don't care and show up, then the party is not going to reflect necessarily what you stand for. So it's the best opportunity. It's the lowest bar and barrier to political activism. There's only a handful of states that actually have a caucus system that matters, and Minnesota is one of them. And it is the night where you get to show up, and it's going to be the first Tuesday in February. And you can go to, I believe it's Secretary of State .mn.caucusfinder. I'll post the link in all the shows, but if you just search Minnesota caucus, you basically, in the same way that you go to look for your precinct when you go to vote, it will show where your caucus is based off of your address. You show up and you literally get together with your friends and neighbors that live in your area, and you get together and you elect some local Republican representatives for your party. And then those people get together, and then they go and endorse someone like you for state rep at that next level. And so I encourage people to get out there and get active and get involved. And for you, Walter, how do you feel, from going out to DC and getting this kind of different perspective, and with all of the attention being focused on Minnesota, has that changed how you feel about the prospects of being able to, have a true majority in the state house, or being able to flip these constitutional offices? I know that, we're at the point in the show where it's more like freewheeling, man. Just want to try and get your perspective. Same with you, David, if you want to throw anything out there. But I'm just kind of curious if you feel there's been any change in what you think is a greater potential or lesser potential, or the same.
Well, look, I mean, I'll be real honest in my response. I'll give you my optimistic answer, and I'll give you my reasons for concern. All right. So my optimistic answer is, good God, if we can't do it under these conditions, then maybe we should just pack up and go home. Jesus. all these stories, all this fraud, all this incompetence, all this ineptitude. If we can't prevail under these circumstances, then maybe we should all, question what it is we're doing with our time. However, that certainly doesn't make it a layup, right? Like, if anybody knows how to snatch defeat from the jaws of victory, it's the Republican Party of Minnesota and everybody involved with it, right? Again, going back to the fact that we have 14 candidates for governor, we got at least 4 for Senate, and that mess is not going to be sorted out until August, which is just insane. So what, we're going to have like a month and a half, 2 months to figure out, to make our case to the general populace about whoever our candidates end up being. And between now and August, we're going to be fighting each other over who those names are. That's not a good position to be in. Unfortunately, it's inevitable. Like, I don't see any way out of it, because you're not going to, it's not like you're going to get all 13 of the people who aren't endorsed to say, all right, I'm out then, because it's just not going to happen. So that's a problem. That's a liability. The other unknown, of course, obviously, is who are they going to run for governor, because Walz is dropped. But I'm less concerned about that, simply because, like, the initial conventional wisdom was, well, Klobuchar is going to get in there, and that's it. Like, Klobuchar, I mean, she's like the Incredible Hulk. Like, there's no beating her. And I find that so simplistic and unsubstantiated, because yes, Klobuchar has done very well in the race for U.S. Senate over the years, and she has high likability in the role that she currently has. But you got to take into consideration who she's been running against, and you also got to take into consideration the fact that when you're running for a legislative role, even at the federal level, boy, you can just put on whatever costume you want. And the costume that she's put on is, I'm going to fix your pool drains and make some hot dish. Come on, kids, we're going to the state fair. Like, that's her whole thing. Yeah. Is I'm just a nice lady, right? And that's not going to fly running for governor, because when she's in the middle of that shtick, somebody's going to walk up to her and be like, hey, can you get this dude out of my girl's bathroom? And she's going to have an answer to that.
A real answer.
A real answer, right. And she's not used to that. She's not used to the scrutiny. And she's famous. The open secret about Klobuchar is that she's a hothead who treats her staff terribly, has incredible turnover in congressional staff as a result of her as a result of the fact of being literally the opposite of what she portrays herself publicly to be, which is just a really nice lady, right? So that's going to come out. You're going to see Democrats who are going to be, they're not going to come out against her, but they'll be subtle, like they'll leak stories and stuff. Like ex-staff members who are like, screw this lady ain't going to be my next governor. Like, that stuff's going to happen. So I think the prospect is real. What concerns me more than any of what I've already noted is the suspicion that at the national level, your level there, AK, the RNC, or at least the Trump administration perhaps, that they have made the political calculation that Minnesota is done for. That there's more political utility in watching us burn and using that to bolster the base everywhere else than there is in actually trying to help us here in the state of Minnesota get our state back. I don't see a lot of, yeah.
That's actually a very, very interesting point that I've been saying. Like, listen, I think the thing that people like the most about us, Walter, other than the fact that we are both handsome and chocolatey, is that we try and be as candid as possible. And I go and I tell people all the time, like, conversations that I've had with RNC leadership, with administration officials from the White House, because they have a political director team, is that Minnesota, as of today, is not on the map because we just don't have the polling to substantiate that we are going to be a competitive state. So my goal always is to try and say, yeah, but we need to do some more polling. Yeah, we need to do some different things. And then I literally go to the candidates. I've had a conversation almost with every single person that's running for statewide office and most of the federal that aren't already elected. And I've been very candid. Show that you can raise some money. Show you can raise some money, and that will change the calculus. Just because you really feel like you want to run is not enough, because again, whether you use talking about the Cook Political Report, which yes, I think their bias is everything. But I've talked to some independent pollsters, Rich Barris and Mark Mitchell. I've had personal conversations with them at America Fest. I hung out with Mark Mitchell for like 2.5 hours, man, just chopping it up with him. Dude is hilarious. And we're just talking about Minnesota, and the truth is that we have to be able to compete financially better than we have before. And so I'm super candid about it. Do I think that it's a foregone conclusion? No. Am I necessarily as jaded to believe that there's a political calculation to like leave us out so they can use us as political fodder because it's going to be good to like say like look how crazy and evil Minnesota is while not necessarily investing? I don't necessarily have that exact take, but I think it is because we do have a lot of work to do. And so again, I've been super candid to all of the candidates when I've talked to them wearing my RNC committee man hat, is raise some money and show that you can be competitive and raise some real money. If you don't, yeah, man, we're going to be on our own out on an island. And I've made these pleas even to Turning Point Action. I've been like, can we get a door knock ballot chase program? And it's like, show you can be competitive. And that onus ultimately rests on the candidates. And so that doesn't mean that we can't beat the odds. It happens, man. There have been times when against the odds, because you just have the sheer will and determination from the people, that you're able to, again, defeat a Goliath, you know, in your David. That can happen. But yeah, I again, that's why I think people like us is like, I'll be straight up with you and tell you that that's what the deal is, man. Like, it's not all like, oh yeah, we've got this, man, slam dunk, bro. It's not. I wish that it was. And it's infuriating that it's not, because again, people will be like, how can it not be? I'm like, listen, as much as X is important, and as much as, again, Nick Shirley shining a national spotlight has been huge, there are plenty of people that still have no idea in the state of Minnesota about fraud. They literally don't pay attention, dude. And as crazy as that sounds, there's a lot of them that vote that still don't have a strong opinion about fraud and the Democrats' complacency and complicity in the fraud. So yeah, David, I because I like Walter so much, man. I've been talking way too much. I'm gonna just be quiet and I'm gonna let you take the show for a while, brother.
No, listen, you're good. I can listen to you talk all day. It's like sitting at the feet of Plato and Socrates for Minnesota or something like that. You certainly make more sense than anybody on the left that's been talking lately for Minnesota. I'll say that much. But yeah, no, I like that we're able to have these conversations, and like I said, like with the different stories we covered, kind of cut through the noise, and then also talk about, you know, the things that Representative Hudson's going to be doing in the future for, you know, the state of Minnesota and things like that. I will say, instead of the governor T-shirt, we should get whatever you said about the chocolatey handsomeness or whatever. That should be a T-shirt. If I can get the chat to agree with me on that, that'd be fantastic. Real quick, we do have one other comment. Just says most politicians are openly confessing Bible as their foundation of truth, and many people are seeing that this is just the best option for support. How do we find more support from the church, and how do we find others with those values? That is a great question for you, Walter, if you want to answer.
Well,
that.
it's happening, right? It's happening. Like I think the biggest problem we have in conservatism is the lack of engagement by the church. You have a lot of pastors, and I don't know when this happened, and there's probably books that could be written or have been written about it, but at some point we moved away from like the fire and brimstone, talking about sin and how it translates into your personal responsibilities in the spheres of life where you find yourself, family, government, business, to this kind of fruity foo-foo. It's like it's one of two things, right? It's either the fruity foo-foo nonsense. Like I remember I went to a church one time with my wife years ago, and they literally had a sermon about Oprah, which I was like, okay. I mean, I could have listen. I didn't have to drive
Which
here
book
for
of the
this.
Bible is she in?
Yeah, I didn't have to drive here for this. I could have just flipped on my TV from my bed. I would have been a lot more comfortable, right? But the other way that it happens is people who are biblically sound, like they're saved, they're born again, you know, all that stuff. They're pastors, but all they do in the form of preaching is just like read a passage and then talk about like the underlying Hebrew and Greek meaning of the words, and like give this academic dispassionate lecture about what it really means to be saved for the 1,000th time. It's like I don't need Christianity 101 when I walk into the church at the end of the week. What I need, now I'm not saying Christianity 101 isn't important. Of course it's important for people who are just coming in the door, but I would argue that like you should almost have a separate thing for that. Like the people who are just coming in the door, you'd be like, hey, can you show up in here on Wednesday night? We got a new believers thing, and you can walk them through what it means to be saved, right? I've been a Christian for decades. I don't need to review the basics. What I need to know is, how does a Christian behave in this context? What is the Christian response to Renee Good? What is the Christian response to the worst abortion policy in the world that was just adopted by Minnesota in 2023? What is the Christian response to a culture where our kids are watching, you know, YouTube shorts about body count and red pills, and like what are the cultural implications of that? That's what I want to hear from the pulpit. And indeed, you know, being politically engaged, like I'm not saying on Sunday morning you got to give a political rally, but you should have a table in the corner somewhere of like, here's some stuff going on politically that you should be paying attention to as a Christian, because you have a moral responsibility to engage civically with the power you've been endowed through the Holy Spirit. Give the Spirit life by putting the rubber on the road, right? Like that's the way a church ought to be. And I see some churches doing it, but very, very few. Now there is an organization, it's called Restore Minnesota, that is definitely focused on changing that. And of course, Turning Point Faith is another one. But that type of transition does need to happen.
Yeah, and like to that point, Walter, like I think that we've talked about this too, David. I know you got some thoughts about this too. There needs to be this awakening within the body of the church, right? That yes, our job is to go out and make disciples. Like we have to go out. That's what we have to do. It's our Great Commission. But that also means that we have to be representative of the values that we have within our current system. And I think that disconnect happens with a lot of people. They think, okay, well, yeah, I'm going to go out and I'm going to make disciples of others, as the Great Commission calls us, as Jesus calls us to do. But that doesn't mean that you get to abdicate your civic responsibilities in the society that we live in. Because if we were holding our elected officials to the standard that we believe that Christ commands us of, then I think that we would see something significantly different. And here's the thing. I'm not even telling you to do this to vote for the Republican. I mean, that's where you're going to end up being most of the time. All right. But at the end of the day, like, you don't have to do this as a Republican Democrat thing. You just say, I'm going to go out and I'm going to support those that have these values, and I'm going to force my elected officials to hear what I have to say. And then again, you're going to see an outcome that's different. But yeah, David, what do you think about that question specifically, about how do people find others with these values and get more support from the church to go out and find better representatives, or to flip over these seats that are currently held by these demonically oppressed Democrats, man?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately it all comes down to spiritual warfare. And I was actually fascinated listening to Walter talking about the Oprah church, because when I first moved up here to the cities area and I was trying to find a good home church, I got to hear some wild stuff, and it was actually right around the time that the whole George Floyd thing was happening. So I would walk into these churches that they looked great, they seemed like they had a great message, and then the preacher's up there for 20 minutes talking about St. Floyd, and I'm like, hold on a second, like, can we get some gospel? Can we get some law up in here? you're just CNN with a white robe on, like what's happening right now, or a cool sweater vest, or whatever, depending on what kind of church it was, and it was just it was really odd. I go back to this thing that I've said before. We have this issue with Christians nowadays, where you have these people that are so heavenly minded, they're no earthly good, and if even Charlie Kirk talked about, you look at the heroes of faith in the Bible, right? Moses, politician. Joshua, right? Politician. King David, politician, right? Solomon, politician. You had
Daniel, servant of the
Yep.
king. Joseph,
absolutely.
administrator. Yeah.
Yeah, and actually Joseph's a great example. He went from slavery to being the right hand of a king over an empire, and it's like he was meant to use his political abilities for the benefit of his people, for the benefit of God's plan, and we need more Christians to see that that's an equal part of it. We're commanded to fight evil wherever we face it. We're commanded to live with courage, and we desperately need that more of that awakening. It seems like it's starting to happen, but we definitely need more of it. It was nice to see during like the Trump campaign, you had all these young frat boys on college campuses that were doing like open prayer and singing hymns, or what I mean, raising the American flag. So I think it's there. We just need the problem is now we need somewhere for all those young men to go, and that's something the church has I would say been failing at lately in the last decade or so, is just having a place for young men to go. Our producer AM threw out there that a lot of times when you speak the truth, it hinders your donations, and I think that's where a lot of preachers, especially in the cities area, might be more apt to talk about St. Floyd or Oprah instead of some law and gospel.
Yeah, and listen, I think as we get ready to wrap the show, it is I'm a person. The reason why I ended up settling with the Republican Party and becoming so specifically activated to be a Republican is because I think that we have the right foundation. I think that the premise that God created us, and he created us with inalienable rights, and that he gives us the ability to go and live a life that is worthy of him, and to make those choices, and factoring in the fact that we have a fallen nature, and that factoring in the fact that we need to be able to do things to protect our families and our nation. I think all of that is part of what makes the Republican Party, to me, the best party. The other aspect of that is that we have the ability as we the people, as cliche as it's and overused as it often is like we do have the ability to inspire, and we do have technically, right, the ability to elect our representatives. Now, that doesn't just stop at electing a representative. So the people of the church going and having conversations with their pastors and with their fellow members in their congregation need to be able to inspire each other as well in the ways that they can. And like, even in my own little way, like I recently started going to an awesome Assemblies of God church. I'm now a community member. We have a church called Maranatha that's up in Forest Lake. The pastor's name is Mike, and he is an awesome dude. But as I'm there, like, there's people that are coming up to me constantly, and they're like, man, I love the work that you're doing out there. And I'm just always encouraging. Every time I meet someone, especially a brother or sister in Christ, I encourage them, like, you need to take one more step outside of your comfort zone and get politically more engaged every single time, because that's actually how we do it. And I think Charlie Kirk had the right mindset and mentality. And so I just, to your point, Matt, thank you for the comments over and over again, like putting so many out there that, again, refocus. Like, we have this commission. We're called by men of Christ, and to be leaders and to make disciples of not just men and women, but also of nations. Like, we have to be serious about this. But in closing, Walter, anything that you got coming up, any events, campaign fundraisers, anything that you want to tell people about, and also where can people
fancy
find
dress
you?
balls?
dress balls.
Listen, I'll put on a suit and tie for anything.
I should definitely be doing a fundraiser. I don't have one currently planned, but I gotta do. I'm so bad at that. Like, I need somebody else. Like, I do everything. I'm a one-man shop. Like, I do everything. I'm my own treasurer. I'm my own everything. My own media guy, and I do not have the skill set for all those jobs. I need to get some people around me to help me out with that stuff. But yeah. So what I'm looking ahead at, first of all, I'm looking ahead to a very well-earned vacation with my family coming up here before session. I'm not going to provide any details for obvious reasons. And then I'm looking forward to ramping up towards session. I mean, we're gonna have a meeting here with the caucus over the next couple of days in St. Paul to kind of prep for what our priorities are going to be and translating a lot of these ideas into actual legislation and try to see what we could get done. I'm not too optimistic that we're going to be able to be very productive in this current political environment with a tied House during an election year. But, all we need to find is one reasonable Democrat in order to get something reasonable passed. And maybe we can actually do some good for the people of Minnesota. And if you want to track me, you want to find me, I'm on X at Walter Hudson. I'm on YouTube, that Walter Hudson, and Facebook and all of that. Should be pretty easy to find. And, HudsonforMN.com if you're so inclined. Speaking of fundraising, there's my campaign website. The link is up there. Very much appreciate any support people are willing to provide.
Awesome. And David, where can people find you? You got anything coming up? Want to let people know about?
Oh man, yeah. What are we doing? I'm sure there's some nerd convention that I'll be going to at some point. Get to your local BPOU meeting. That's my other advice. You can find me at X at 50 Webster. Everywhere else is just David.Webster, or just look up David Webster. You can find me on YouTube. You can find me on Facebook. I'm usually posting my random thoughts for the days, or I'm trying to post something to upset some of my more sensitive liberal friends and see how long those friendships will last.
Nice. And I'm AK Kamara. You can find me on X, Instagram, and Facebook at Real AK Kamara. You can also follow me over on TikTok at AK Kamara. Every Friday, I'm on the John Justice Show from 7:30 a.m. to 9 a.m., part of the Freedom Friday guest lineup. And thank you guys for tuning in to episode 9. Hopefully next week we will have the third leg of our amazing political cultural podcast. Drew Outstanding back with us. Thank you so much, Walter, for joining the show. It's always amazing, great fun time to have conversations with you, man. We're able to break it down, be honest, be real. And for those of you that are watching, make sure that, again, you hit the like button, hit subscribe or follow on whatever platform that you're watching. We also are putting these podcasts out wherever you can find podcasts. So Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify. We're going to be everywhere there for those of you that would rather listen audio only. And we'll see you guys next week. AK Kamara, David Webster with the Culture Warriors Unchained podcast. Be safe out there.